frontiers of northwest China, horsemen called Kazakhs still ride the remote hills between Tibet and Mongolia. Horses are essential to the Kazakhs' way of life and are valued for their beauty, strength, and above all as a measure of wealth. The Kazakhs are nomads and followers of the Islamic faith, bound together by a common ancestry and strong family ties. But life is changing. Many Kazakhs are members of the Chinese Communist Party, and their children are taught the lessons of socialist history. Within the complex society of China today, the Kazakhs struggle to maintain their cultural identity. They are the Horsemen of China. Next on Nova.
Major funding for NOVA is provided by this station and other public television stations nationwide. Additional funding was provided by the Johnson & Johnson family of companies, supplying healthcare products worldwide. And Allied Signal, a technology leader in aerospace, electronics, automotive, advanced materials, and chemicals.
The Tian Shan Mountains form a natural barrier between the People's Republic of China and the Soviet Union. Tribes of nomadic horsemen called Kazakhs claim this vast territory as their ancestral homeland. For centuries, the Kazakhs moved freely throughout these hills, crossing back and forth between the Chinese and Soviet nations. But when territorial disputes heated up in the 1950s, a military zone was established, and this ancient tribal people found themselves split along opposite sides of the border. Close to 1 million Kazakhs live in a remote region of China near the town of Urumqi. More than 6 million Kazakhs, however, live within the borders of the Soviet Union. Both countries have sought to win the loyalty of the Kazakhs because they occupy these strategic border areas. But the Kazakhs fiercely defend their traditional way of life and hold on to a strong bond with their past. The name Kazakh means fugitive or adventurer. Only a few anthropologists have studied the Kazakhs, and these rare photographs taken at the turn of the century show that they lived then much as they do today. Although they claim kinship to the great Mongolian warlord Genghis Khan, Kazakhs are descendants of Turkish people from the time when Turkish nomads stretched across this region of Asia. Kazakhs are often confused with Cossacks, the famous military units of the Russian Empire during the 17th and 18th centuries. The Cossacks were frontline soldiers who saw tribes like the Kazakhs as their enemies. The foothills of the Tian Shan Mountains contain some of the richest pasture land in China, and the Kazakhs have herded their cattle, sheep, and horses to these same winter grazing sites for hundreds of years. The Kazakhs are one of 50 minority groups that make up about 6% of China's population. Most Chinese belong to the main ethnic group, Han. In 1949, when the Communist Party came into power, they forced the minorities to accept the new political and economic structures of communism. The Kazakhs were organized into communes and worked for the state. But because they are isolated, the Kazakhs have retained their traditional way of life much longer than other minorities. Although few Westerners have ventured this far to study Kazakh society, the Chinese government did give permission for a British television crew to film the Kazakhs. The crew chose to follow Abdul Kahir, a respected elder and leader of his family group. The day the crew arrived, Abdul Kahir and his entire family were shearing their sheep. This was in preparation for the move they were planning to make the next day from their winter to their summer pasture. These brightly colored dresses are not the kind of clothes usually worn while doing heavy chores, but the young women were excited at the prospect of being filmed and used the opportunity to show off their finery. Traditionally, only the men would be responsible for the shearing, but nowadays all members of the family participate. The women use the wool to make clothes and wall coverings to decorate their homes. All of the women in this family group are skilled at making felts. First, the wool is flattened, then dyed and cut into shapes that are lavishly embroidered or appliqued onto one another. Each woman develops her own set of patterns based on floral and animal motifs passed down to her from other generations. The Kazakhs depend on the milk of their animals for much of their food. They almost never eat vegetables or fruit. Yogurt, however, is a staple item in their diet. A dried yogurt called kurut is made by heating milk until it boils. After a culture is added, the mixture is dried in the sun and solidifies into cakes that never spoil and can be easily transported. The family is the center of Kazakh life. Abdul Kahir and his extended family, including his married sons and their wives, share meals together. Usually a simple meal of bread and tea spread on the floor of his wooden home. It's here that he discusses the move they are to make the next day. When the Communist Party took power in 1949, there was much debate about the role of the minorities in the new society. By 1958, radical policies of the movement known as the Great Leap Forward took hold. The Kazakhs were forced to collectivize and to give up individual ownership of their herds. During the Cultural Revolution from 1966 to 1977, all forms of cultural identity were suppressed, and the Kazakhs were forbidden to practice their religion. But since the late 1970s, Chinese policy towards the Kazakhs has been more lenient. They have been allowed to practice their Islamic religion and to continue their nomadic way of life.
Жердің бірі шөбі жақсы болады, малға жайлы. Екінші су жақын. Үшінші жел тимей жылы. Төртінші таңертең күн ертесі жай шыға жылы болады. Біз отырмаса қыстауға шөп шықпайды. Жайлауға шығып мал семірдік, қыста келіп біраз қайтып қыстаймыз. Боран қатты соғып кеткенде малдардан қораларға қамаймыз. Анау сиыр қора, біреу ат қора, ана біреу қой қора. Боран қатты болғанда қамаймыз. Күн ашылғанда қоя береміз далада жатыр. Адам түгел барады. Енді үйдегі дүниенің жазы істететін апарамыз, қыз істететін қалады. Киетін мына ішік. Шалбар дейміз, олар қалады. Жаз киетін киіммен күшін.
Abdul Kahir and his family make only 2 migrations a year because pasture land is plentiful in this region. The winter quarters usually belong to one family of several generations living together in log cabins or tents. The day that Abdul Kahir and his family were to leave their winter camp also marked the anniversary of his wife's death. The sound of wailing could be heard from inside the house. Among Muslim societies in Central Asia, it is customary to mourn the passing of a family member 1 year after their death. Prayer is an essential part of the ritual, and Abdul Kahir recites a passage from the Quran. Although the Kazakhs have their own language, religious chants are spoken in Arabic. The Kazakhs were converted to the Islamic faith around the 17th century. Religion is a fundamental part of their culture. Abdul Kahir finishes his prayer and hurries the women back to their work. The women take charge of packing the household belongings, while the men ready the animals for the journey to the summer pasture. The move takes days of preparation, but the actual packing can be done within hours. Each of the felt-covered tents, called yurts, is disassembled piece by piece. The wooden frames support up to 15 large felt covers that provide protection against the bitter mountain cold. Personal wealth in Kazakh society is determined by the number of animals that are owned by the family, and by decorative items like clothing, jewelry, guns, and felts. Chinese policy after 1949 discouraged the accumulation of personal wealth. In traditional Kazakh life, it would have been important for families to display as much of their wealth as they could. So when they moved, the finery, like carpets or embroidered felts, was ostentatiously draped over the animals for everyone to admire. Today, Abdul Kahir hides his most valuable possessions in the middle of the bulky loads. Some Kazakhs travel over distances of up to 150 miles between their winter and summer quarters. Here in the Tian Shan Mountains, Abdul Kahir doesn't have to move as far, since his winter home is just below the pastures of the higher mountains where he spends the summer. Abdul Kahir and his family begin the trip alone. But as they travel, other families and their herds join them. The spring migration is the most hazardous because many of the animals have been weakened by the heavy snows of the winter weather. During the journey, women from camps along the way bring gifts of sour milk.
Hayran şimdi, hayran. Aman yoksular. Söyle bakayım. Sapır.
Keeping to tradition, they give the first cup to Abdul Kahir as the senior man in the party. He gives thanks to Allah before drinking. For the Kazakhs, most activities have religious significance. The older Kazakhs still wear traditional clothing, while many of the younger men have adopted the communist garb of blue jackets and caps. The clothing is easy to buy, and it's part of their desire to be seen as members of the modern Chinese culture. After several days, the caravan reaches the place where every year they erect their tents. A lush valley surrounded by evergreens at 10,000 feet, where other families have already established their camps. There are about 100 families who share the summer grazing land with Abdul Kahir. The families are all members of a group called a production team. In the late 1950s, the Kazakhs were organized into these teams by the Chinese government. 4 teams make up a brigade of about 2,000 people, and 3 brigades make up a commune. On his arrival, Abdul Kahir, as the senior member of the group, is offered refreshments by those who had arrived before him, while the women and younger men in his family unpack and set up his home. Tents are designed so that a stove can be placed in the center and the smoke will exit through a hole at the top. Abdul Kahir has 7 members in his immediate family, and all of them will sleep in this tent. Kazakh families have gathered together like this for hundreds of years, so even though these camps are described today in terms of production teams and brigades, they are based on traditional kinship structures. One member of the commune, Mukai, is the last person to use eagles to hunt rabbits and foxes, a skill for which the Kazakhs were once renowned. For years it was discouraged by the government because it represented a form of cultural identity and private enterprise.
Болмағандықтан жан бағу үшін өзінің әрекет қылып бір техник қызмет оқшаш көріп, бағып, үйретіп, адамның тілін білетін қылып, қымбат бағалы аңдарды ұстап, осыменен біраз пұл табу, және ата-бабаларымыздың мұрасы деп бірінен біріне қалып, атадан балаға мирас болып, қазірге шейін жалғасып келе жатқан.
Although the Kazakhs could abandon the practice of hunting with eagles, horses remain critical to their survival. The Kazakhs call their horses their wings. Sturdy and small, these horses are valued for their speed and endurance, and because they offer mobility in the rugged mountain terrain. They have long been an object of admiration, and possession of a large herd is considered a sign of wealth and prestige. A proverb says that a Kazakh prizes only 4 objects. In order of importance, they are his horse, his gun, his birthplace, and finally his wife. Years ago, there were a few skilled blacksmiths who traveled from clan to clan making horseshoes on fires in the camps. But more recently, horseshoes are purchased at government-run stores. First, one of the men trims the horse's hoof with a sharp adze. He pounds the shoes, making slight alterations in their shape, and then nails them into place. This horse is being shod for the first time, and it takes at least 3 men to hold it down. Spring is the time when mares give birth to their foals. It is also a time of celebration. As part of their traditional festivities, the Kazakhs prepare a mildly alcoholic drink made from fermented mare's milk called kumis. The men of Abdul Kahir's team get together to help catch the new foals so that the mares can be milked. It can appear as if the Kazakhs treat their animals roughly, but in fact, their horses are their most prized possessions. The Kazakhs help the foals to suckle so that their mother's milk will start flowing. The horses are milked only during the spring and summer seasons when the milk is plentiful. Since the members of Abdul Kahir's team have come together to do the milking, they use the opportunity to hold a committee meeting. The committee has a secretary and 4 other members who are elected every 4 to 5 years by the team. The committee structure provides the most radical departure from traditional Kazakh life. Tribal elders have learned to accept that the committee, including younger men, has authority over their herds. In the past, the Kazakhs wouldn't have allowed a younger man to call the older man Yoldash, meaning comrade, since it shows a lack of traditional respect towards them. Some Kazakhs say that even though the younger men are allowed to speak, the older ones pay no notice of them. Although Chinese policy has encouraged the participation of women, in fact, very few become committee members.
Onda bugün joldaşlar başçılık жыйында bir qatar keleli meselelerini müzakere ettik. Negizden düğümüz içinde 5 meselege birlikte keldik. Bunun ekevini özümüz hal ettik. Misalı malды jaylauga köşürүү, mal semirtүү, mal dabalaw, kыстауды тазалау деген жұмыстар дүйдің ішінде бітетін болды. Жолдастар бұған бірлікке келдік.
Қане осылай істеп бола ма жолдастар?
Болады.
Осыған бірлікке келдік қой.
Келдік. Олда рахмет Бижан Барбайсың торғы жеткісі мына біздің пікірді.
Мына кісілер де кек балған екен. Ассалам алейкум. Саламатсыздар ма?
Аман жақсыздар ма?
Жүріңіздер жолдастар, жүріңіздер.
Once the mare's milk has been fermented, the first tasting gives the whole team an excuse to celebrate. In Abdul Kahir's collective, the host for the festivities is their team leader, Ahmed. During the time of the Cultural Revolution, the traditional Muslim greeting, salam, meaning peace, was discouraged. It's only within recent years that the greeting has again become part of gatherings like this. Once everyone has come together, a sheep is brought in that later will be slaughtered for the feast. The oldest woman present opens the ceremony with a prayer.
O mindesen güne bata, on жағында Kıdır ata kıyadan kıyalasın, sabana kovalıya kıyalasın. Tavdan versin, taştan versin, çağırğından akıp taştay versin, yendigili biye baylauğa, savğanğa, kişi çıkma, eşleri çıkıp, kımızı akbılak bulakısın, Allah!
The women put the finishing touches on the kumis and will distribute it to all members of the gathering, including the children. Family is all important to the Kazakhs, and they value having many children. The one-child policy in China does not apply to the minorities, so they tend to have large families. Although the drink kumis is not very strong, the Kazakhs, who are not used to any alcohol during the rest of the year, rapidly become tipsy. The Kazakhs' cultural heritage and the old way of life are expressed through folklore and music. They often engage in singing competitions between two people where music and words are improvised. The winner is the one that can improvise the longest. Although the old traditions are kept alive, significant changes have occurred in Kazakh society over the last 35 years. They say they have benefited from the brigade system that has closed the gap between rich and poor. Now, children have the opportunity to receive an education, and almost 80% attend schools run by the brigade and supported by the government. Abdul Kahir told the film crew he believed his life is better for these changes.
Onda fark köp. Ben bala günümde 9 yaşında jaldan barık dedim. Biz maldarçılık kalıpız. Жоғары шаруаларым мен 9 yaşında malım baktım. Mana çavanda tayak жоқ, mana ayak tas tilip jalan ayak жүрміз. Sonday mihnat tartқан adamбыз. Енді азаттықтан кейін біз өзіміз, әзіргі баладарымыз, менің 6 балам бар. Баламның барлық қызмет көрінасты. Азаттықтан кейін партияның саясаты бойынша мен өзім партияға қабылданып мүше болдым, баладарым түгел оқыттым. Әзір бір балам ғана мен үйге берген балам қызметте жоқ. Толық оқытылмадым, пеше сауыр. Қалған баламның барлығы қызмет істеді. 4 балам мемлекет штатын өтті. Bir балам 10-cı класс бітіріп, Дашоның imtihanına кетті кеше. Fark деген көп.
At the local school, Abdul Kahir's daughter Aziza is the teacher. The books are provided by the government and the text has been translated from Chinese to Arabic. Although the lessons are taught in the Kazakh language, the stories are based on communist themes.
Marx ve Engels жақсы dostlar bolatın. Olar ilimdi birge zertep halkaralık cumhurlar kozgalısına birge başçılık etip birlikte gazet, jurnal çıkarıp
After the Cultural Revolution ended, the Chinese government developed a campaign against illiteracy. The main focus of the campaign is to teach children to read and write in their own language.
Kertartpa üstemdiktin kulağına tap bolgan. Uzak vakit çette sürgende bolup öte nesiye beretin dükönge жүрүп кийимин кепилге коюп алган акчага нан сатып алып жүрөдү.
By Western standards, Kazakh children are receiving a haphazard education. They spend only 1 hour a day in school, and if their parents need them to guard the herds, some children may not attend school for several months. A few students may get the opportunity to learn more than just these simple stories. Education is a form of status, and some families will send their children to schools in the city, where more advanced subjects like math and science are taught.
Marx ben Engels kalay etini istestik ornatıp birine bir kömöktesken. Adak seni.
Engels Marx'tan durmuş yaktangan ağzı kömöktesip koygan yok en mağazı komünizm ister yolunda olar özara. Kamkorluk jasap özara kömöktesip etini istestik ornattı.
The school and the summer grazing lands are about 5 miles from the brigade headquarters, which services 4 production teams. When the Chinese government organized minorities into communes, they sent representatives to this region to institute the changes. The representatives have since left, and the brigade headquarters are run entirely by the Kazakhs themselves. The headquarters consist of an administrative center, shearing facilities, and most importantly, a store. Aziza, Abdul Kahir's daughter, and other women from his household said that in the past it was difficult and took weeks of travel for their men to go to the town marketplace to buy necessary goods like shoes, cloth, teapots, and even grain. And it was virtually impossible for the women and children to do so. Today, in the government-run shop, Aziza can buy most things she needs, from kettles to sugar to sweets. She pays with money earned from her job as a teacher. Until recently, the brigade had a scale of points earned by each of its members, whether they were herdsmen or school teachers. At the end of every year, these points were traded in for goods or animals. Early summer is a particularly busy time for the brigade because the yaks must be branded. Yaks are high-altitude animals that can carry loads of almost 700 pounds. They are used for carrying tents and other belongings into the mountains. Branding is a dangerous task and requires most of the men living in brigade headquarters to help out. The main product produced by the brigade is the wool collected from individual families, which is then sold to the Chinese government. In the past, the Kazakhs took their wool on horseback to marketplaces in the larger cities. When they were collectivized, almost all of the animals were owned by the brigade, and the brigade paid its quota of wool to the government. Recently, because of changes in Chinese policy and the move towards a free enterprise system, families have regained ownership of their herds and are able to keep more of the money earned from the sale of wool. They are, however, still obligated to meet quotas and provide some wool to the government. This sheep dip is a modern invention. After having been sheared, the sheep are thrown into a chemical bath to rid them of parasites like ticks and fleas. The brigade still maintains a herd. In the years when herdsmen do exceptionally well, the brigade gives some animals from the group herds back for private use. If the herders don't do as well as expected, they may have to deplete their private herds to maintain the brigade's income. The brigade's output was monitored by a committee which meets regularly to discuss the welfare and progress of its 4 production teams.
Düzcan hep kaptı koy düzcan. Yaksız mı? Düzcan kandı. Yaksı geldiniz mi?
Özde de düzcan yaksız mı?
Oturuz. El yurtunuz ama hizmetiniz yaksın mı düzcan?
Aman.
Yaksız mı?
Yaksız be tabi. Zihinleriniz ayakladı.
Yiyinimiz ayakladı. Sizin biraz cumusunuz var degen sizi şakırdık. Kanday cumus var ekeni uşayık.
Eminde bir ekştirli fikir var. Yoldaşlar tezrek el etip berse.
Ahmed, the leader of Abdul Kahir's team, has come with a request for help from his committee. Ahmed has no authority here, and the brigade committee has the right to agree or refuse to give him help in building a fence. The first speaker is the senior member of the committee, the brigade leader, who has been elected by the production teams.
Otun kömürün kajetli orunga jetkizip bersek.
Tavga köşkün malının kömür, tuz. Bu suyuktu cumuslarını yetkizip bereten maşine kajat bolsa, bir maşineni çıkarıp bersek, tezlikte uaqtında yetkizip berse kalay. Ekinci, 500 yen akça suragan eken. Tavga baratın baktaşlarının kıyınçılık kajat üçün yer uzak kaytıp kere almaydı. Bugan sizi tura görsöňüzde so 500 yen akçany bersek, üşelerin kıyınçılığın çeşip, malların tezlikte köçürse kalay. Üçüncü cumus, arık jasaymiz boydagy barıp. Jok tawdagy öşürdögi muna kıstawdың jayılym korgaw jana baskaday hizmet isteymiz degen pikirde joldaş ortaga koydu. Menin köz karasımda oydagy arykty 9-njy aýyň birinden bastap istesek.
Because the brigade leader spoke in such positive terms, it's unlikely that the other committee members will contradict him. But nonetheless, everyone is expected to voice an opinion until they all agree. The decision is then formally given to Ahmed.
Onda düzcan jumusunuz bitken bolsa, jogarda jumus solay ornaştırıp, жаңа akşany derew barıp bugün alıňızlar, ha? Kayta barıp, siz düy joralar jynyny aşyp, osu hizmeti tezlik tornalaştırıňızlar, ha?
Bolat.
Ya onda sağ bolunuz, ha? Hizmetiniz ýaly bolsun, ha?
Kene aman turumuzda kettik. Kettik önemli. Kene aman turumuz.
The main economic ties between the Kazakhs and the government are through the sale of wool. The Chinese are now exporting wool products throughout the world. After careful weighing and packing, the wool is sent on a 3-hour drive to Urumqi, the capital of Xinjiang province. Urumqi has a population of almost 100,000. Very few Kazakhs live in the city. Most people living here are members of the main ethnic group, Han. They were sent here during the Cultural Revolution and are now employed by industries making carpets and woolen garments. This booming business depends upon the high-quality wool provided by the Kazakhs. The government's current policy is to give the national minorities more autonomy, and the Kazakhs now find themselves in a more powerful position. They're able to supply the government with a needed product and still retain the profit. While the men are away during the day at brigade headquarters, the women continue with the daily chores like milking the sheep. The herd is tethered in a row. Many of the sheep have given birth this spring, so the women are careful to leave enough milk for their lambs. The sheep's milk will later be mixed with milk from their cattle to make yogurt and other foods. The wool kept by the women of Abdul Kahir's family is used for felt making, embroidery, or to weave bands that are used to tie around the tents. In the past, the women used natural dyes for their weaving, but now they're drawn to the more vibrant colors of synthetic dyes available through the government store. Some of the older members of the camp, like the mullah, pray several times a day. Since the Cultural Revolution and the discouragement of religious worship, not as many Kazakhs pray openly. There is only one mullah left. He's 76 years old. During the Cultural Revolution, when all traditional religions were suppressed, he had his religious books burned and had to stop praying openly. Today, he's allowed to practice once again. In their summer camp in the mountains, most of the Kazakhs are isolated from the activities of the brigade camp 5 miles away. When they need medical attention, doctors make the journey to their homes.
Qancha vaqt bo'ldi? Bir juma bo'lib qoldi. 7-8 kun bo'lib qoldi. Qaytib o'radi. Bana olsa ağzıma yetmeyince kolumu satmaydı vermeyecek. Yukarı köçetmeydi Osman'ı yakın.
Tündüge bağıram mı, kunduzge bağıram?
Tündüyeceksin ağrı bir almaya almayayım ben.
The government has begun to train some Kazakhs in medicine. This young man, after only 3 months training, uses both modern techniques and acupuncture to treat the mullah's stiff shoulder. The Kazakhs used to rely on a combination of herbal medicines and prayer before the barefoot doctor system took hold in China. Acupuncture became more widely used after the Cultural Revolution. Although the mullah is allowing the treatment to take place, he does not fully believe in it.
Mına yığınızda sar su var eken. Kuraq iğne koysak biraz tavır болады.
Practitioners believe that the use of acupuncture restores balance to the body. In the case of the mullah, the barefoot doctor says it will rid his body of the toxins that are causing pain in his shoulder. Needles are inserted into any of more than 2,000 points in the body. The Chinese believe that the insertion of the needles helps stimulate circulation and directs energy to tissues in the body that require healing.
Yüzdü mü?
Acupuncture has a 5,000-year-old history, and in China today it is used widely in the general practice of medicine.
Qanday, biraz жақсы болып қалды ма иығыңыз?
Жақсы болып қалды, жақсы. Sarsı olsun bugünün bari sarsı hem soldu, жақсы болды. Bari yük betti koy.
Uyudu. Uyuған жақсы. Күн аралап тұрып чаңсып тұрсаңыз, ана иығыңыздағы сарсу тарқайды.
Болады.
Кішкене көтеріп көріңіз, сен. Бірі жақсы. Қандай, бірі жақсы болып қалды ма?
Шие сәуір. Onun kazanğında dalga salganda çağır bu артынан қайтып ұстап тұр.
Many Kazakhs opposed Chinese attempts to suppress their religion and to change their way of life. In the late 1950s, some fled to Turkey and to Germany. Others went just across the border to the Soviet Union. Those who stayed in China, like the mullah and Abdul Kahir, continue to value the old ways. But traditions like their marriage customs have undergone change and have affected the Kazakh society far more than expected. Abdul Kahir and other members of his family are riding back to their winter grazing area to discuss the forthcoming marriage of his daughter Aziza. Abdul Kahir still follows the tradition of going to the groom's family for formal discussions between the two sets of parents. Families are connected by ancestral bloodlines, and marriages are seen as a renewal of these relationships. In the past, the bride's family brought gifts to the groom's family as an affirmation of their relationship. In turn, the groom's family offered a bride whelp, usually horses or sheep that secured the marriage contract. This tradition is now prohibited by the Chinese government. The groom's family showers the bride's family with pieces of bread in a gesture of good luck. Unlike their parents, Aziza and her fiancé made their own decision to marry, a reflection of the changes taking place in their culture today. Weddings used to be arranged by matchmakers, usually the parents of the couple. Matchmaking served several purposes, but one was to guard against marriage between families that were related within 7 generations in the male line. Now, as in the past, this pre-wedding ritual provides a time to celebrate, to feast, and to reaffirm family ties.
Биылғы жылы өзіңді қуанттық, құда болдық. Ақпадаға кірдік. Құдай алдына шейін бала сіздікі. Екі баланың бұдан былайғы жасының ұзын болуына.
Daughters are more precious in one sense than sons. They're called guest children because they are only at home for a short while before they marry and go to live with their in-laws.
Vatamızda beremiz.
Biz toydu tutup geldik. İki balanın ömrünün uzak bolun dileye geldik.
Aziza and her fiancé obey tradition by staying away during these discussions, and they won't even attend the lavish feast being prepared in their honor. They won't officially marry until their parents have completed these ritual meetings at which everyone discusses the worthiness of the match and the character of the young people.
Körөгөгөнгө караганда биздин әзіргі балаларымыз өзүмүздө бай бакытты заманда туған баладар. Өйткөнү körөгөгөндө әйелде еркілік болмайды. Ата-анасы сөйлөсөдү, сол жерге барат. Көп сандык ыктыяр болмайды. Одан кейін оны körөгөгөндө малга сатады әйел. Бағасын тоқтасады. Пәлен байды аламыз. Пәлендей деп отырып сөйлесіп, сол малға körөгөгөндө сатады, сатқан жерге әйелдер разы болмайды. Барат.
Көне қоғамда алып айтатын болсақ, біз айтайық. Әйелдерден де айтайық. Көне қоғамда отбасынан, қазанғасынан көрмегенді көріп, жегені таяқ, естігені сөз, шашты жұлып қолға берген. Секілдің барлығын көріп білген әйелдеріміз. Бүгінгі күнде партияның арқасында, әкбарлығында біз мұндай жақсылық көріп отырмыз. Теңілік тиіп отыр бізге. Бұрын мұндай жерге келіп, бір ауыз сөз сөйлемек тұрғой, бір ауыз өлің айтпақ тұрғой, қорғала бәуел жасқанып, көрінген есікті жүретігіміз. Көне қоғам деген сол. Мен өзім тұпты бұра 12 жасымда 54 жастағы кәрияға келдім. Ол кісі 74 жасында қайтыс болды. Көне қоғам деген сол. Қазіргі дәуірде жас баладар өздеріменен өздері сөйлесіп, махаббат құрып, ата-аналары да разы болып, барлық халықты разы болып, барлығы қуанышта бірлікте кетіп бара жатыр.
Ақындықпен өлеңді біз айтпаймыз ой, құдалардың айтамыз қадырын ой әридай, құрбылар салыңдар әридай, әридай. Жазу жаздым қағазға имай жимай.
The older generation of Kazakhs have held on to their traditional culture and their Islamic religion while living under Chinese communism. But the younger people are in the midst of change. Despite their acceptance of the new ways, they acknowledge the need to keep Kazakh traditions alive. Even the young bridegroom is reluctant to lose his identity as a Kazakh.
Осы бірнеше жылдан бері партиямыздың азаматтарға деген саясаты өте жақсы болғандықтан қайтадан бұрынғы салт саналарды жастарға үйретіп жатыр. Бұрын осы сәлем берудің өзі де жоқ болып кеткен. Бірнеше жылдың алдында. Әзір қайта барлыққа келіп, жас балаларға дейін үлкендерді құрмет ететін, сәлем беріп тұратын, осындай жаңалықтар барлыққа келіп жатыр. Сондықтан енді бұрынғы салт санада қалмауы мүмкін, жалғаса берер ме екен деген үмітчеңдік көзқарасымыз бар.
Aziza and her fiancé Toktasin look forward to a life that will be much like that of their parents. The young people still practice some of the customs that are important to the older Kazakhs. At occasions like this wedding, the unmarried girls chase and playfully whip their boyfriends to show who belongs to whom. Even the older members of the clan take part in the festivities. The Kazakhs have accommodated their traditional way of life to the current political and economic realities of Chinese communism. Over the last few years, the government has adopted a policy of tolerance towards the minorities. And these new policies have made it possible for the Kazakhs to express their culture more openly. For now, the Kazakhs are able to preserve their customs, but the tension between old and new will undoubtedly continue. The future will present new challenges to Kazakh society. And how Abdul Kahir's children and his grandchildren decide to face these challenges will determine the extent to which the Kazakhs continue to be known as the Horsemen of China.
My
Tomorrow night at 8, see a film documenting the breeding season and courtship behaviors of the king penguins on Survival Special. Now stay tuned for a look at America's poverty on Frontline.
For a transcript of this program, send $4 to Nova, Box 322, Boston, Massachusetts, 02134. Please be sure to include the show title. Major funding for Nova is provided by this station and other public television stations.